What is up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Breathe and Air podcast, where everyday action meets extraordinary mindset. Today, we have the host of the Great Unlearn, and someone who definitely is putting out positive messages and impacting a lot of lives, Mr. Callahan. Thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks, Mason. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's great to be on. It's been a little while since I guess I was on a podcast last week, but I've gone months. We've traveled during the summer, so I'm just kind of getting my legs back under me. So this is great. I'm excited to share.
Well, I'll get your memory jogging off the top today. So
Okay,
let's
nice.
say it's the year's roughly 2000, and you're on the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. What's going through your head at this moment in time?
Ooh, 2000. I got married in 2000. I had been trading. I started trading in 96. 99, I became a partner. So I was really hitting my stride with work and was right in the thick of trying to prove myself. And which was great because there was a lot of focus around work. And, I met my wife about a year. I guess I'd met her a couple years earlier, but, we had our first date was 11 months before we got married. So it happened pretty quickly, but I found the love of my life. My wife, Peyton, is someone, we've been married, 22 years now, that she just knocked my socks off. It's like, fuck, I didn't know women could be like this. Whoa. I grew up in the Northeast. I went to a small, school up in Massachusetts. My wife's from Florida. I went to University of Florida. It's just like, oh shit. I hadn't been introduced to the thong yet. So to give you an example of where I was coming from. So, there was a lot of great things happening for me. The trading firm that I worked with up until 2013, these guys became my brothers. Very much a home for me. So life was great. We'd had a couple really good years. And I had no complaints at all. Life was really exciting. I felt like I kind of had the world by the balls in some ways.
Yeah. I'll definitely agree with you that the women are a lot different in the Northeast and the West Coast than the South. I don't know. There's something about Southern women.
Yes, sir.
Something about it. But there was a man that really helped guide you, I feel like, through this time, kind of mentored you. How important was that for you at that time to really help your growth?
Honestly, it was essential. I grew up, my dad and I wouldn't say we had a close relationship. We still kind of to this day don't. What I've come to learn and appreciate is that my dad was doing the best he could. He grew up in a really shitty home, and the way he showed love is different than I show love. And so it was a little bit more distant. Wasn't much of a mentor in some ways. Sure, he worked really hard and was resilient. And so I learned and picked up those things from him, I think. But ultimately, it didn't have that warmth and that true kind of guidance that you look for in a mentor who will really take you under his wing. And so I was fortunate enough. I got hired out of college by a guy named Will Hobart. To this day is like a father figure to me. He's a little bit older, so there's still a bit of that brother aspect, but he was the guy that whenever anything was not right with me, I went to him. And he always had great guidance for me, to the point where, I would say, there have been other men in my life more recently that have had a great impact on me. But consistently over the years, there's been no one that I've gone to more than Will. The way he showed up for his family, how intense he was at work and how important that aspect was, but was really able to separate that and really put family first. And it's a delicate balance. And so I was able to learn that. So vacations were very important, to spend time when your wife gave birth. Like, you got a week off, no questions asked. If you needed more time, take it. Like, be there. Just like be there. The work comes second. We're all there, trying to make as much money as we can, but it's just work. And don't kind of get those, don't blur those lines. And so I like to think that I've been able to carry some of those same principles as I've, guided other men. But I learned a lot from Will.
Yeah, I think for a lot of high performers and anyone that's listening to this at this point, you have an ambition and a thirst for more knowledge, and so you probably have high ambitions and goals, and that's sometimes a hard line to be able to dissect with that work and that life balance when it comes to relationships and yourself and family, and those things are so important. Like, what advice can you give to someone who's struggling with that balance and how to find that center?
Oh, it's such a great question. And it's really, it's very interesting because I felt like for the last couple of years, I had a great balance in that. And it turned out that I didn't.
Yeah.
Right. And so first piece of advice is, if you find yourself in the situation that I found myself in, where there wasn't that balance, it's okay. Be kind to yourself. Start to make steps to change that. And for me, one of the things, with my podcast, I was recording it out of my house. I have this like really cool office, kind of, we call it the Unlearn layer. It's like a really dope space where people come hang out. It's also my office. It's a great space for shooting the podcast. And I loved it. And people loved coming there. They'd walk in the room. It's like, bro, I just feel something.
Yeah.
But it was putting some pressure on the family, in the sense that when I'm recording a podcast, they had to be quiet. I tried to do it when the kids were at school, so that was good. But we have a couple of dogs, so we had to put them up. And my wife, just people coming into the house all the time. I wanted to make a change, so I was going to build a podcast studio on our property. And as luck would have it, before I started construction on it, I was literally going to start it that week. I had bought a house at auction. It was like a ranch out about 35, 40 minutes from my house. Because I get to, one of the things I like to do is play in real estate and do some investing. And this was just like kind of fell in my lap in some ways. I had bought it a couple of months earlier, but it occurred to me that week, like, why don't I just have the podcast out at the ranch? Like, get it off property so people aren't coming to my house.
Right.
Really, really hold that home space sacred. And so for me, there was too much blending of the two, to the point where I even come out here, again, it's 35, 40 minutes to come out here. I come out here to work now. And it's been great for me to separate those things, so that when I'm at home, when the kids are home from school, I'm not getting pulled into my office anymore. I'm not trying to check emails. I'll check emails when I wake up in the morning before anybody else is up. And then aside from that, I'll just wait till I come out here. Nothing is that important that requires my immediate attention. And it's just like separating those things and prioritizing. And it wasn't until I started to unwind that I started to feel a lot better about the connection at home, and what, my wife and I are trying to cultivate with our kids. And our kids are older now. My boys are 19 and 16. My daughter's 15. But we're just already feeling a shift. There aren't people coming into the house that the kids don't know. We're really trying to, like I said, keep that space sacred, and it's felt really good. It's, it's been a couple of months, but it's been a really important couple of months. And then I get out here and I'm super energized. It's like, okay, it's game on. Like, what do I want to get done? I get it done. It's a really cool home, so I get to just kind of drop into a cool vibe, and it's not all about work, but it's been a great space for me to start to, again, differentiate between the two.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. And I think a lot of people can with this new shift in remote work as opposed to going in. It's so much harder to separate that. And like, there's so many pros to being able to be remote and, be able to work that way, but it's also harder to separate. So I definitely think that would be a positive to have a place to kind of like you go in, you lock in, and then you can separate that family time. Seems important for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And somebody kind of mentioned to me, hey, it might be nice for you to have an office. I'm like, why would I do that? Like, this is a dope setup. Everything's right here.
Yeah.
And what I would say to anybody listening now, if you can afford to do it, have an office away from your house. Just do it. It allows you to get out of the house. It allows you to separate the two with your partner, with your kids, whomever. They're no longer wondering, oh, is dad working right now? He's in his office. And I always try to keep my, I don't really have a door on it, but I try to be welcoming. But at the same time, energetically, they could walk in and I could be somewhat engaged. I'm not really present with them. And so even though I'm with them, I'm not really there.
Right.
It's much easier now. I just come here to do my work.
Yeah.
Now, listen, if something's pressing, yeah, of course, I'm going to do it at home.
Right.
But generally, not many things. When I really drill down, there's not much that needs like I said, my immediate attention.
Yeah, absolutely. The podcast, for people who don't know, right? Creating a podcast is, a lot of things, but one of the things it is work on the front end, right? You have to design this vision that you're going to project to the world, right? And there's a lot of things that come with it, a lot of personal growth that I've had with the podcast, and I'm sure you have as well. But like, what made you want to start a podcast in the first place?
Yeah, great question. Living in Austin, if people aren't really familiar with Austin, there's just a lot of really interesting people here doing some really cool stuff. And so I was meeting a lot of these people and having many just epiphanies about what was being shared with me, and really hanging out with people that maybe I wouldn't have hung out with years before. They didn't look like me, they didn't act like me, they didn't have necessarily the same interests, but as I started to open up and get curious about life in general, I started to recognize where I closed myself off. And so meeting these people, having these conversations was opening up a whole new side to me. So then I would share these conversations with like my buddies from the trading world, like, oh, fuck, I met this dude. He's into, whatever, trauma releasing exercises. This guy's into biohacking with red light.
Yeah.
And I just kind of got sick of sharing it in a one-off situation. I'm like,
Right.
I need to have these people on a podcast so I can share what I think are meaningful conversations to a larger audience. And for me, I could just be curious, really kind of be the dumbest guy in the room and ask the questions that I'm really curious about. And that led to me wanting to start the podcast. I had a couple of friends who'd already had podcasts, Kyle Kingsbury, Aubrey Marcus. So I went to them like, how do I set this up? They recommended, they both had video with theirs. So I, from the beginning, I've had video, got, whatever the equipment was I needed to get. I had someone producing it. And then over the course of the last couple of years have shifted a few things. My production company's different than it was in the beginning, but ultimately it's the same format. I just bring on people that I'm curious about their story. And it happens pretty organically. I'll get a ping like, oh, it's time to have, Luke Story on the podcast. I'll reach out to Luke. Hey, Luke, do you want to record in the next couple of weeks? Yeah, sure. Okay. Like, let's set it up. And I don't generally, I get a lot of incoming for people to come on with PR agents who, their person's promoting something. And I generally say no to those for no other reason that I have plenty of people to talk to that I'm genuinely curious about. And I think that just plays better. It's me initiating like, ooh, I want to dig into this part of your story. And then I know from there, so much cool stuff flows.
Yeah. It really does. It's that word flow too. Like whenever I lock into a podcast with someone, it kind of initiates that flow state for me that I got from sports my whole life. And so I think back, like when I started it, I was just talking to people who I was interested in. Like I was getting so much from this while building skills and while other people were enjoying the journey that I was creating along the way by being vulnerable, right? By telling my truth. And So I think it's a worthwhile pursuit for anyone that really has something on their heart that they want to be able to share. If what other areas has it helped you in podcasting in general? Has there been any other specific areas in life where you're like, this has really helped me here?
Well, I'd say the biggest one that comes to mind is just my ability to listen
Mm.
and to be patient. And as you know, like when, I can feel right now when you ask me a question, you allow me the space to say what I want to say. You're not trying to cut me off to show that you know what I'm talking about, right? And some people do that, and that's fine. That's their kind of process. But for me, it allowed me to really drop into conversation. And so away from the podcast, when I'm talking to someone, I come in just super curious, and I'm not trying to prove anything about myself to them. I just want to know about them. And I think it allows for a much deeper connection with someone that you're just meeting.
Yeah, there's a lot of times where I get off like an hour with somebody. I'm like, dang, I feel like I know more about you and connected more with you than a lot of people I've known for a long time, right?
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing when you start feeling that. I want to hear about the whole basis of your show, right? The Great Unlearn. Like that is a powerful statement. And I think it's, even more important today than ever. So what does that mean to you? What's the Great Unlearn?
Yeah, the original title was Working In. And for me, a big part of my shift was that I started to cultivate these practices that were about working in, about building energy, restoring your energy rather than expending it, like working out.
Right.
So these things helped me slow down. They helped me drop into presence. And so I really wanted to take that direction, but there was like something, I even had my album cover, I had everything set, and it just wasn't quite covering what I wanted to share on the podcast. And so I was working with a close friend of mine who's done all my branding. He's like, dude, just throw down a bunch of words that mean something to you. And unlearning was a big part of it. And he came up with the title, The Great Unlearn. It's like, bro, that's so good. Like, that's it. And it's really coming in to a conversation, coming into your life, looking at your life with that curiosity, without having to prove that what you did was right. It's like, okay, what, how am I showing up in the world? Why am I showing up that way? And as you dig into it, you start to learn that you pull in things from your mom, your dad, your teachers, unfortunately from the government. There's all these different ways that we are, as Don Miguel Ruiz says in the Four Agreements, that we're domesticated.
Mm.
So once we start to become aware of that domestication, we get to undo those agreements one by one. And in doing that, we free ourselves up to learning in a different way. So it's really unlearning what's been programmed and coming into anything with an openness and a willingness to sit with whatever's presented to you, and letting go of how we've shown up in the past and what doctrines we have supported and stood by. And it allows for, again, when you're talking to someone in at a cocktail party, much deeper connection, because I'm not trying to prove anything I'm not trying to oppress my theories and dogma onto them. Now I'll share my thoughts on things, but when you're I would say when you're in a season of unlearning, you're just curious. And I think that opens us up to much deeper learning and getting, like really getting layers deeper than otherwise, we're able to. It's like when we think we know the answer, we just shut it off. We're just looking for any way to prove ourselves right. When we don't have to be right anymore, we get to explore in a much different way.
Yeah, I think anybody that consciously is aware, I think that's the biggest piece, right? You have to be aware of these patterns and maybe these subconscious beliefs that you've created over the years, whether, like you said, it was from parents and experiences or traumas that we've had, or stuff that we maybe not even realize that we've been kind of indoctrinated, like you said. For someone who's listening, what's one of the first steps that they can take to start unlearning? Like, how can they maybe start strengthening that awareness to understand some of those patterns?
Yes, because first, like you said, awareness is the key. And so when you start to become aware of the things that trigger you, like just sitting with it, why does this thing that my partner says, why does this bother me so much? Or my kid, or something I see on social media? Why do I feel such, an attachment to whatever it is? And I think when we start to peel back the layers, we start to see that these aren't our thoughts, these aren't our feelings, they're someone else's. Again, there's someone else's agreements. And for one, I know when I started this journey, I'm like, how the hell am I gonna undo all these agreements? There's so many of them. And it's not about getting to a completion, of this. It's about being curious and sitting in the inquiry of it, and being okay. And I said it earlier, but just giving yourself grace through this. You don't have to be right. You have your experience, you have your truth in that experience, and it's going to be different than someone else's. And just understanding that we only see life through our lens, our
Right.
eyes, and that everybody else has their own experience. And whether we're in the same room and having a shared experience, my perception is going to be much different than yours. And so it's just like giving space for all that stuff to be, and in being okay with whatever you find out. And like, there's a lot of times there's guilt, there's shame. It's a lot of these things that come up because we look back like, fuck, how did I come to that conclusion? How did I act that way, with my partner? It's like, you did because it's the best you had in that moment. You had a set of tools. That's how you use those tools. Maybe today you're in a better place and you would do it differently, but that's all learning too. Like, we've got to be kind to ourselves. We're in all moments, we're doing the best that we can. We just are. And sometimes it's like a shitty outcome. It's a shitty presentation.
Yeah.
And just like being an acceptance of that. That's just what happened. Okay, what can I do to maybe connect to that, and do it differently next time, and have awareness, slow things down, have the witness consciousness where I'm actually observing what I'm doing, how I'm reacting. Is there shit happening in my body that's a sensation? There's a tightening. There's like, what's going on? And then just trying to go levels deeper with that. And just be
Yeah.
curious. I mean, I said fucking curious a million times today, but
Yeah.
that's been the biggest thing for me is, can I just be curious and stop having to be right about everything? Fuck everything. That's why, growing up, and it was a pattern in me. Like, I was great in math. I was great in these subjects in school that had a right answer.
Yeah.
And I just noticed this thing. It's like, it's been reinforced in me. And even with trading, there's a P&L, so what your account balance is, and there's like a scoreboard, and it's like
Yeah.
all almost outcome driven.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we can just settle into this other space of not having an answer, but just being in the inquiry of it, it could be really fucking cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That gray space is cool. And the more I kind of get into, like you said, working inward, even in business and stuff, like looking in those gray areas is where a lot of magic can happen. And so I think it's cool that we separate from that outcome, like separate from that mathematical equation of 2 + 2 = 4, and like kind of step back a little bit from that witness consciousness, like you said.
Yeah, and that's probably been one of the biggest shifts in my life, has been, and I don't know how directly this is to the podcast, but it definitely had some impact. But I've been investing in private equity stuff for, I don't know, 25 years.
Yeah.
Over the past 2 years, I completely shifted, I would say my process around what products I want to invest in. And it became, do I love this product? And if the answer is no, then I won't invest. Like I have to believe in it. Would I, and if, the kind of the fallback on that is, would I tell my friends about this product if I did not invest? And if the answer is no, then I won't invest.
Right.
So it has to be something that I wholeheartedly believe in. Do I have a connection with the founders? Do I believe in them? Are they trustworthy? Yes. Okay. Then I can go on and do the due diligence of, does this all make sense from an investment standpoint? But the layer that became super interesting to me is I've been involved with a few products recently that are doing amazing. And rather than like racing to an exit, like I can't wait to get the payday.
Yeah.
There's a big part of me that's like, I don't want to get there because I love this journey. I love being in partnership with these different teams. I know that when there is an exit, that's over and that journey is over. And so instead of worrying about the outcome, which was basically what I had, the lens that I had looked through, the outcome is very secondary. Now I am obviously try to do enough due diligence where the outcome is also going to be a positive experience, but it's really about, I'm going to be spending the next months, years connected in some way energetically to these people, this team, this product. How do I want it to feel? Because the exit happens in a flash and it's done. So like, what am I going to really be spending my time on is this relationship. And do I want to be in bed with these people?
Right. Yeah. That's important. Was there a moment for you where it kind of clicked? Like where you had maybe an awakening, or was it something that just happened over a period of time? I know everyone's experience with that is a little bit different.
Like in general, my awakening type of experience.
Yeah, when you started really getting, like you said, curious into this new way of thinking and living.
Yeah, I had a very profound experience in 2017. Oh, damn. It was actually 3 days ago.
There you go.
Wow. 5-year anniversary. I was in Las Vegas at the Route 91 Music Festival, the mass shooting.
Oh, wow.
In Las Vegas. And I was at the concert. And as the shots, were being fired, I was huddled behind one of the tour buses with a friend of mine that had come to the concert with me and a bunch of other people. And in that moment, I didn't know what the outcome would be. And just had this sense of surrender, like this could be it. There was really nothing I could do. I didn't have a gun. Even if I did, I wouldn't know what the fuck to do with it.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't know at the time that it was one person shooting from the hotel. I didn't know if it were a bunch of, like a fucking terrorist. We just didn't know.
Yeah.
But I just had this sense of like regret. Fuck, man, here I am on the outside. I've lived this incredible life, but I'm completely unfulfilled. Like, why? Like, what the fuck? I followed the rules of the game. I quote unquote achieved more than I ever thought I could. But yet, if I died right now, I'd be like disappointed. And so when I left, I obviously was able to, kind of leave safely. That started the journey for me. Like, why am I here? Started kind of somewhere in my soul, that question started to emerge. And 2 days later, I was at an IV therapy session called NAD+, which helps with your regenerating your mitochondria, executive functioning. Yeah. So I had done it before, and had it scheduled before I left for Las Vegas. So I came in, and in the room was Tim Ferriss, Aubrey Marcus, Kyle Kingsbury, Lance Armstrong, and a couple buddies.
Damn.
So this is like, I did an 8-day dose. So I was there for a couple hours a day for 8 days. Now, not everybody was there for 8 days, but everybody was there for at least 4 days. So here I am, really a fly on the wall as these guys are exploring all these things about consciousness, psychedelics, fasting, the universe, relationships, talking about their podcasts. And I was blown away. And I would go home every day, listen to podcasts, order books on Amazon, watch videos. And it just started to stir this thing in me of, okay, why am I here? And I was like kind of going at it with this, like trying to get to the bottom of it, which again, there's no bottom of it.
Yeah.
But I was consuming a lot of information, and that really kicked off my journey. It was like Las Vegas coupled with this group of men that I happened to be exposed to soon after, like gave me the kind of the portal into that exploration. And so from there, again, it's been 5 years that I've been on this, I guess, more conscious journey.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane. That talk about like a synchronicity in life. A lot of
Nuts.
people would pay a lot of money to be in the room with those guys, just have a chat for like 4 days. Like that's priceless, man.
That was not lost on me either. I was like, this is so fucking dope. Like I couldn't wait to come back the next day. It was cool for sure.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Out of all that, when you're in that room, I mean, were you kind of just like soaking it all up? Like, what was that like in that period of time to be around? I mean, really a lot of great men in that room.
Yeah. So I'd known Lance before, so he and I had a rapport, but Lance was more curious than he
Right.
hadn't experienced a lot of that stuff or some of it or any of it, so he was more asking questions.
Right.
And Lance is an alpha, right? And so I'm pretty good at reading the room. I had a deep connection with Kyle from the beginning, like fucking heart to heart. He could see in me someone that, like, this guy just came back from this experience. He's got a family. I think he could tell that my curiosity was earnest. And so he wanted to feed that. So I really spent a lot of time with him. Tim is very open, but also I'm not the one who's just trying to, butter his nuts.
Right.
I'm not going to ask him questions just to ask questions,
Yeah.
And so I felt a lot safer doing that with Kyle. And I would just let those guys have their conversation, and I would, chirp a little bit here and there. And they were all curious about my Las Vegas experience. So it's like I had something cool to share.
Yeah.
And I don't mean, like, obviously it was a fucking tragedy. So
Right.
I don't want that to get lost. But
Right.
I had something that had their interest. And they could just see that, like, fuck, this guy has not been exposed to any of this. Wow, this is kind of cool that I haven't been exposed to it, and I'm really open and I'm asking questions. Just like when I find someone who maybe doesn't have the experience that I have and they're asking me questions, it's like I get really excited because I know that feeling. It's like, oh wow, I can be a bit of a bridge for this person. I can point them in the right direction of answering, or at least getting in deeper into the inquiry of what they're curious about.
Yeah, I think especially for men, there's always been a bit of a stigma to not open up about some of those things that, you're going through, and, maybe like push those feelings down, like the whole saying, rub some dirt on it. Right. And I think Aubrey puts it in a beautiful way, talking about warrior poets, right? And that, like, you can be this alpha male and still have this super vulnerable space with other men, and that how empowering that is. I heard you actually talk about a moment you had with your wife where, you had the awareness and vulnerability of a time that was like very key to helping you take that next step in your relationship with your wife, and like how important that was to you. Like what happened in that moment, and how has that vulnerability been a strength for you in your life?
Yeah, I would say that's something I tell you, I can be super vulnerable on the podcast. I really learned from Kyle and Aubrey. Those were the guys that I was really listening to a lot before I kind of stepped into the space. And so that's just what it resonated with me, and it was
Yeah.
easy for me. And that was another thing that podcasting really helped me do, is kind of get my story out a little bit. People have maybe an impression about what my life is like.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they don't really know. They don't really know that fucking things aren't always awesome, and that I
Yeah.
totally fuck up,
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
so to like really balance that story was great for me and felt really good. But I would say I still struggle with the vulnerability. It's And it's funny, whenever I do really show that authentic vulnerability with my wife, great shit happens. It just like completely opens her up. But there's just some part of me, it's holding on tight to, showing up for the family. Like, we've got this, it's all good. If we're dealing with a little bit of stress or crisis, like trying to be the rock. And it's like, it's important to be that rock, but also to open up the heart too. And I think that's the part that's been really hard for me. So there are moments, and I remember, I'm not sure if you're referring to the point when I was having lunch with, I talked about this before, I was having lunch with Aubrey and Kyle, and I knew Peyton wanted to talk to me about something when I came back from the lunch. And Aubrey's like, brother, don't go in with a strategy. Just go in, be open, listen, receive her, all that kind of wisdom. And it's like, oh, okay, so that's a lot easier. There's no fucking thinking involved.
Yeah.
And I just remember that she was having a hard time with our relationship. I was feeling closed off, and part of it was because of this pursuit of, like I said, trying to get to the bottom of why I'm here, was just another act of intensity on my part that was shutting others out.
Mm.
And so there's nothing wrong with that kind of earnest pursuit, but it's when it's closing off those closest to you, like, what's it for?
Right.
So I came home and I just received what she had to say, and I didn't try to defend myself and make excuses and make myself right. And I heard her, and I just shared that, thank you for sharing that. And I hear you.
Mm.
And then from there, we got to work with that.
Mm.
She for so long had been used to a different interaction. And so by showing up differently, that like, took the hammer out of her hand,
Yeah.
so to speak. So yeah, that was like just such a simple piece of advice that unfortunately I don't use enough. But that's just one of those things, you just keep in your back pocket. Just stop with the strategy. You don't have to be right. See them, hear them, receive them. It's just like, it's so simple.
Mm.
But as I said, I've got years of patterning where, growing up with my dad is like important to be right. I thought important to do well, to earn his love, to earn his respect, to get him off my back. And it doesn't work well in a relationship.
Mm.
And so that's one of the things I'm working, at, I don't want to say working really hard, but I'm working to stay aware of it when it shows up, and then sitting with it. Why am I feeling this? Why do I feel like I can't be wrong? What does even wrong mean? My wife is giving me feedback. Why am I receiving it as, oh, fuck, I'm in trouble, I've done something wrong? That's the 7-year-old in me that's showing up,
Yeah.
and he's got a place, but not at that moment.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of the work I'm really sitting with right now, like this old patterns.
Yeah, it makes me I know you had Eben on your show as well.
Oh, I love him.
Man, I had him on the other day.
You did.
I did. His episode is actually going to come out tomorrow, so I'm excited. But man, him and I have a lot in common with, growing up with sports and having a singular pursuit of football. I didn't
Yeah,
play at the.
tell me, give me just, you mentioned you played sports growing up. Give me
Yeah.
your background on that.
Yeah. So I grew up playing all the sports, but I played football in college, and sports always just was a huge part of my identity. I think naturally I had a little inclination to athleticism, and then I just worked really hard. I actually mentioned this to a friend of mine. I went on his podcast the other day, but kind of the unlearning process, I realized that, a big driver for me on top of the natural athleticism was that when I was moving around a lot as a kid, I moved in like sixth grade, which is a weird time when you're going through puberty, trying to make friends, starting to look at girls a little different. And I had grown so tall. I'm 6'6" now, but I was maybe like 6'2" or 6 foot at a young age.
What?
I was
You're
tall.
6'6"?
Yeah.
Holy shit! I didn't know that, because you look
Yeah. I'm
6
sitting
feet
down.
right now, sitting
Yeah.
down. Oh
But
shit!
I didn't really grow into my body. So like I was naturally gifted and bigger, but I was, lanky, kind of uncoordinated in that, and got bullied when I had first moved. And so I was like, fuck these guys. I'm going to show them. Right. And then that drove me, I think, for the longest time, even now with like wanting to continue my fitness, it's taken a different viewpoint and perspective on it. So I kind of got to the root cause of like, man, I worked super hard all this time to like prove other people wrong. Like I was wanting an outcome, and I loved the game, and it gave me so much. Like, I don't want to get that confused by any means. I absolutely loved it. So that really helped. But I found like this root cause of me really like pushing myself past boundaries that other people wouldn't, to get to where I wanted to be, because of that, like just that thing of remembering what it felt like to be picked on, to be made fun of when I was running, or like those little things, that root cause. And I came to that realization like recently too, which is very interesting. But I went on and played collegiate athletes. Collegiate sports. I had 2 ACL surgeries and dislocated my left
Fuck.
shoulder. And yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, but I think Eben and I really connected on that. And the identity piece, once you're done with sports, was huge for me, and a big reason of why I started the podcast, because my whole life it was Mason the athlete, right? The jock in high school that broke the records and then went on and played, and still proving people wrong when I had 2 ACL surgeries, and like, you're not going to come back from this. Come back. Like, those things in my head like constantly were drivers, but I realized like it was me trying to prove other people wrong, instead of coming from a place of selflessness per se. And so that was a good conversation with him. I think we definitely, like, one of those things where you connect really well. But yeah, he's a great guy. Like,
Yeah, and I love. By the way, he's coming to town in a couple weeks, and he's going to come on the podcast again, which I'm super excited about. He's such a beautiful man.
Yeah, he is.
But I love what you're bringing up. It's like you're motivated by proving other people wrong, and we see so much of that in our culture. And it's not bad per se, because look at what you were able to
Right.
prove to yourself. It's just a matter of, when do I want to use that? It's having discernment, instead of, being motivated by, proving other people wrong, you know, ideally, and I think is what you're saying, like being inspired. So it comes
Yeah.
from within to want to, be the best you can, or whatever inspires you. But you you were able to prove that you have the capacity. So now it's just like, how do I play with that? I've shown that I can go past limits that I thought were maybe there. And so that's great. It's just that we run out of juice when it's always about proving someone wrong.
Yeah. And I think where I was going with that too was our relationship with ego, right? Because we wouldn't be having this conversation if we just like had no ego, or we were just like floating around like a monk in the mountains. But also ego in our relationships, ego in our work life, like it plays such a vital and important role, and it always has for me. You know, you hear like the greats talk about, you know, you got like Jordan and Tom Brady, and you listen to these guys talk about, you know, I had no doubt in my mind, like I know I'm the best. Kobe, I know I'm the best. I get up at 4 and I do these things, and like I put in the work to know that I'm the best, which is ego. But at the same time, like being able to not let that ego get in your way and make emotionally drive decisions where you are in the state of, I'm trying to prove people wrong. Oftentimes I feel like you'll drive yourself off a cliff doing
Yeah,
that.
and you have no direction. There's
Yeah.
not a North Star. It's always changing. And yeah, I love East Forest. I don't know if you're familiar with his music at all, East Forest.
I think I've heard of him. I'm not, maybe.
Well, in one of his songs, he talks about partnering with the ego. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's such an interesting concept because you do hear things like you want to fucking defeat your ego and you want to, kill your ego, whatever. It's no, like your ego isn't good or bad. It is what it is how
Right.
it's our relationship to it. And so we do need our ego. But how can we work with it so that we do have that North Star? So the ego helps us get out of bed in the morning because we're like, okay, I got to show up. And then the other things, kind of your soul maybe fills in the inspiration. Again, I don't know how that math works,
Right.
but yeah, there's this idea that these things aren't, yeah, like I said, they're not good or bad. And I think we get really caught up with labeling ego, and when we can just see it for what it is and use it as a superpower,
Yeah.
like, again, you maybe didn't feel great when you reflected back, like, fuck, I was just trying to prove everybody wrong. But like I said,
Right.
there was a lot of great shit that came out of that. The difference is being able to separate that and realizing, like, it wasn't, you didn't do great things just because you were
Right.
trying to prove people wrong. Like maybe that was the thing that was driving you, but you did great things because you busted through those upper limits.
Yeah.
Oh, that's something to hold on to. That's something to carry forward. Marrying that with a good relationship with your ego, it's like, fuck, unstoppable.
Yeah. I realized that it was those limiters or those doubters or those haters or whatever you want to call it, those roadblocks in your way to getting to where you want to be were like fuel on the fire for me. It was like, oh yeah, I'm going to show you, which I think wasn't a bad thing, but I'm glad I came to the realization that that was such a huge driver for me. Um, and at the same time, I think it can play to like our emotions, right? Because some of the most powerful emotions we have are the dark ones, that, you know, that depression or anxiety, or when you're mad and like all you see is red, right? Like those are some of the craziest, strongest emotions. But if we can channel those and not make rash decisions when we're feeling that state, and we can channel it into something productive, I think that's when you're really creating that form of self-mastery that's pretty unstoppable.
Yeah. And it's, again, it's not unlike, what I experienced in my house growing up. Again, I choose to parent differently, than my dad, but the way he showed up and the way he showed love to me is wanting me to be the best man I could be. And so that was being really hard on me, if I fucked up, he would let me know, and just like really holding me to a high standard. so I was trying to, in some ways, prove him wrong or earn his love. It took me a while because I didn't like that. When I started to become aware, I was like, fuck him.
Yeah.
It wasn't until a few years ago that I had real gratitude for that, because I was able to show that I could accomplish kind of whatever I wanted to. And just much like these kids that were bullying you, like that sucks.
Right.
But ultimately having gratitude for that, because it showed you a new side of yourself that you might not have uncovered otherwise.
Yeah.
So it's like, just like knowing that we don't know how these things impact us. And on the surface, they seem shitty, but they may give us our greatest gifts. And so can we just be in acceptance of all of it? It doesn't mean we
Right.
have to approve of it, but just know that when we're in those tough situations and we're undergoing, a bit of a crisis, that just holding that there's something really good on the other side of this.
Mhm.
Can that just help calm my nervous system down and allow for this to be shitty and maybe the best thing that could happen to me?
Yeah.
It's hard to do.
It is hard to do. And I sense from you, similar to me, like connecting with a tribe or like-minded individuals, like that's very important for us. I think, that's something that sets my soul on fire in terms of like having conversations like this, whether it's on the pod or outside of the podcast, especially with, friends of mine and men that really want to be driven to make a difference. And, like how I think it's like you said with the uncomfortable piece, sometimes those conversations with those guys aren't going to be the most comfortable. Like we all know we got buddies that always give each other shit and like it's all fun and games, but you also need to have those conversations where they're like, hey man, like what's going on here? Like there's something deeper going on to why you're acting like this or why you're doing that. And that's an uncomfortable situation to be in sometimes. Ego gets involved heavily when another man is challenging you sometimes. So what has your relationship been with like creating that tribe? And for someone who is like, man, I need to start surrounding myself with better people, like how do you start curating that tribe or that group of people to lift them up?
Yeah, I'd say one of the things that really helped me was my relationship with Kyle and Aubrey and some of those men, because they were very, very honest about everything. Not that there was a lot of kind of drama, but they didn't let things fester.
Yeah.
Something was coming up for them, they would share it. It's like, oh wow, that's what the divine masculine looks like. That's how a
Yeah.
man shows up and is very clear and is open, but is direct about what they're not appreciating about what's going on. And so just seeing guys like that model it gave me the kind of courage to try it myself. And as you start to cultivate that in yourself, you can share it with those guys in your friend group, for instance, that all you do is bust each other's balls.
Yeah.
And the ego could get involved if you call someone out. Well, maybe you don't call them out. Maybe you pull them aside and you don't do it in front of everybody. And you just open up your heart to them,
Yeah.
create a safe space for them to share. And maybe there's something going on and they don't want to share at that moment. You've got to give space for that too. But just letting them know that you see that things may not be okay. And
Right.
I see you, and it's okay. I'm not here to solve it. I'm here to listen, or to be a safe space for you to feel whatever you need to feel. And I think, just not trying to fix shit. I think a lot of us men in particular, we're fixers, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be fixed. We just need to show up, be present, listen. So I think that's important. As far as cultivating, your own community, your own tribe, start with the people you know, and start to open up a little bit differently. Get curious around, why the fuck are we friends? Are we just party buddies? And is that it? Man, that's cool. But can we go deeper than that? Are we just golfing buddies? Is there a way? And so you can just start trying things out and see how open, any one of these guys will be. And also just put yourself out there, start being a little bit more social. I mean, I certainly was over the last couple of years. And what was cool is I met a shit ton of people here in Austin, and a lot of people that I really enjoyed. Over time, I've kept tightening it up, to where right now I have that kind of, my circle is super tight. And that feels great because I know, like, outside of that, I have other friends that I can call on and would see. But in this season of my life, I'm a bit in hermit mode. My family's really important to me. As I said, this work, kind of home balance is starting to get where I really want it to be. Yeah. So I'm really wanting to cultivate that. It's not leaving a ton of other time for social. So when I do have social time, I want it to be with people that I really fucking care about and that I really just want to spend time with. And it's not about the content of our conversation or me trying to get anything out of it. It's just, I want to spend time with somebody I'm close with. And so I've been a lot more discerning about how I'm spending that time.
Yeah. The intentionality of that time is important for sure. I think, a lot of people are asking and seeking for kind of tools in their tool bag per se, right? I don't think when it comes to health and wellness and this journey that we're on, one size fits all approach just doesn't exist. But there is tools, right, that we innately have, whether it's through our biology or other tools. So what are some tools that you have used along, your journey of going inward and unlearning that have really helped you start to see life through this new lens?
I'd say, currently I'm really leaning on my time in the sauna and the cold plunge. It creates that space for me to be with me. There's the element of the sauna, which can be challenging. And so it allows me to start to be present with how hard that can be when it gets really hot.
Yeah.
Likewise with the cold plunge.
The cold hurts too.
Yeah. And so I've really tried to spend more time in those spaces. I've gone through periods where I've played with meditation. It's been fleeting for me. Yeah. I've never not liked it. It just, I'm not really called to it that much. So right now, there's not a ton of that going on. I would say being very clear about home life and work. And I know I brought that up a few times. It's been a big part of this season I'm in right now. Yeah. Putting the intention behind that has really allowed me to be present when I'm home, to be with my kids, to be with my wife, to play cards, to play games, to watch football games, phone away. And I think when we can really, especially for those of us who do work out of the house, like putting in different, measures to separate the two. And you don't have to sever them, tonight because you think it's a great idea. Like start to peel things away and see how it feels. Give yourself some time to adjust to it. I would say, I'm not a big drinker. I think it was last December was the last time I drank. Like getting stuff like that out of my life has been really good. Allowed me to be a lot more clear-headed. Yeah, just quiet time listening to, I have a record player at home, so sometimes I just like to listen to music.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I've been in a mode of a lot of work, family stuff, sometimes I just want to listen to like a funny podcast. I love listening to Pardon My Take, from Barstool, because it just fucking makes me laugh and I need to chill out,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
leaving space for that, like recovery, it's like kind of mental recovery. I don't have to think
Yeah.
about it. I can just enjoy these knuckleheads that are
Yeah.
making me laugh.
Yeah.
So just like try not
Some
to take life
DMT.
so seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. You I I saw you earlier messing around with some Feel Free.
Oh yeah. I
I
I
actually
love it.
I actually just am about to partner with Feel Free. I tried the product a little while back and really liked it. And I know you've talked with JW. He's actually coming on later today. So there's a sneak peek for anyone that's listening this
Get
far.
the fuck out.
You'll
Yes.
get JW after Cal, but he's coming. So I know you talked about not drinking and stuff, and I feel like there has been a bit of a push and a little bit of an awakening with COVID, at least in the health space, not only with like plant medicine, but also with drinking alcohol and abusing alcohol, and what it can do physically and mentally for you over that period of time. And so I feel like Feel Free has been definitely a good substitute for that. I was going to ask you kind of, you enjoyed it so much that you invested in it. So what has
Yeah.
been your relationship with it? And kind of, you mentioned not drinking since December. I mean, has Feel Free played a role in that, or, how's that been?
Yeah, a huge role. I mean, Feel Free is a lot of things. And for those people listening, it's a kava based tonic that has some kratom in it. So it's 10 parts kava, 1 part kratom. And there's a few other ingredients here. I'll just get my glasses on. It also has pineapple juice, stevia leaf, and natural flavors. So there's not much in it. I have it in the morning instead of coffee. Sometimes I still drink coffee, but it's great for energy. It's great for focus. It puts you in a vibe. I always call it vibe in a bottle. You just feel better when you drink
Yeah.
it. So if anybody's going to try it, you can find it at botanictonics.com. I'm sure you're going to have a discount
Yeah.
code. So just wait for Mason's discount code. And it will be a one-time code. So
Yep.
just know that it's maybe you just use a different email the next time you order it. Because if you like it, you're going to want to get on the subscription.
Yeah.
But you shake it well. And I recommend drinking a quarter to a half of the bottle. There's 2 servings in the bottle. I always drink a half because I'm used to it, but some people a half might be a little bit too much. So you can always drink more. You can't drink less. So
Right.
yeah, I use it often. I use it whenever I'm on a podcast.
Yeah.
I use it if I'm going to have a challenging conversation with my wife or my kids. It just drops me into deeper presence. It opens the heart. The kava opens the heart. Yeah, you mentioned, dude, during COVID, anybody who drank more than they had before.
Yeah, for sure.
Bananas. The numbers show that. So this has been, I say where this is really going to take off is as an alcohol replacement. I think people are using it, primarily when they go into a 7-Eleven as a 5-hour energy type drink, and it works for that. Except it's not jittery, it's natural stuff, and it's a much easier on ramp and off ramp. So you don't even know, it's not like you're not in it anymore. You just like all of a sudden you feel good. You're just not as vibed out as you maybe were. And it lasts 3 or 4 hours, a single serving. This was the first product where I made that shift of, I fucking love this product. I hope the numbers make sense because I love JW and I'd really love to be a part of this. And so I invested. I had it in December, almost 2 years ago. was the first time I had it. A buddy of mine brought it to my house for a party, liked it, bought some more, loved it. I reached out to my buddy, hey, can you put me in touch with the founder? I talked to JW in like January. I said, dude, I don't know if you're looking to raise money. I definitely love investing in the space.
Yeah.
I love this product. I'd love to take a look if you are. He's like, I haven't started raising money, but I'm open to it. So I was the very first investor. I got my
Nice.
buddies to invest. And so we basically took down the first round. We did a second round at a higher valuation. I invested again. I got more of my buddies to invest. Did a third round. I invested again. I got more of my buddies to invest. So I have all my buddies
Bought
in
in.
this.
Bought in.
People fucking love it. I love playing golf. It's the ultimate golf accompaniment.
Dude, I love playing golf.
Right. So it chills you out. It lowers your anxiety, but you feel really good and open, like what people drink for. People love drinking on the golf course to loosen up. This loosens you up, but you're focused, you have great energy, and you have low anxiety. I'm like, fuck, dude. I was always amazed, like, how the fuck does something make you feel like this? And it's legal.
Yeah. That's the crazy thing with this, I've just started messing around with it. I don't think I've drank 10 bottles of it yet. So I'm sure I'll continue to have more different experiences. But what I loved about it too was like, there's a lot of different uses for it. And like, you could use it for an athletic performance, kind of like you said, an energy where you're in that flow state and you feel kind of relaxed. But it can also be for like a quiet time when you're like looking for some added creativity and like some focus and relaxation. So it's a weird balance, like you said, between like relaxed and focused. When you combine those two, I feel like it's hard, as opposed to like a caffeine rush or an energy where you're going to crash and fall off. So
that was that's been one of the most challenging things for us. It's like, what are we? Because we do both ends of the spectrum. And people are like, there's no fucking way you have great energy for like athletic performance. Like my 19-year-old son uses it before a basketball game or a workout. I know a lot of people who use it for sports performance. People use it as a sleep aid. They'll have a little bit, an hour before bedtime, and it makes them sleep like a baby. And so it does hit on all these different things. And all I would say to people is try it for yourself.
Right.
Like, what do you want to use it for? And I'm guessing it will probably support that, which is crazy. It sounds like a snake oil salesman.
Yeah.
But the proof's in the pudding. I mean, it's really an amazing product.
It is. I'm happy to be on board with them. And I mean, how'd
you hear about it in the first place?
Oh man, let me jog the memory there. How did I hear about it in the first place? I don't even know. I'll have to get back to you if it comes to me, but I know that I was interested in it. Obviously had the podcast. We've done really well. I have a good Instagram following. And so I reached out to them and I was like, hey, this is really interesting. I want to try it. Tried a couple of bottles they sent out. Was like, okay, I really like this. Like, what do you guys think about like partnering and how could we, maybe incorporate this on the show? And so then it's gone from there. And now, I'm gearing up to help push the product because I just think it's great. And it's the first product that I've done. We've been doing the podcast for 2 years now, and I have not partnered with any brands. I have zero affiliations whatsoever. I totally took the route of, I'm going to build up this audience and build all this trust over the last 2.5 years before I even try and monetize the show. And so this year I've really focused on not only, some partners and brands, which this will be my first one, but also kind of like building up a business around the show. And so this is the first affiliation of Breathe and Air, and we're hyped, right? That's pretty crazy.
Dude, that's amazing. I love that. To your point, I don't have any sponsors either. And I've had people reach out and it's like, no. And certainly I speak about feel free. I'll speak about the products that I've invested in, but not to, to shill them, but just because I fucking love the products and I use them. So I'm going to tell you why I use them. It's not like it's throughout every podcast, but I'm not afraid to drop it in there. And Oh, I love hearing that. That's really cool. It does. It speaks to the product that this is the
Yeah.
first one that you said yes to because you
Yeah.
believe in it.
Yeah, I do. Eben and I had talked a little bit about this too, but it was especially for the athletic world. I mean, there's a lot of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, like even in that space. You got to be a little, especially football players, I think, but really all athletes, you got to be a little nutty to, put on the pads and go hit people. And a lot of times, like we said earlier, there's some, deeper issues that come with that aggression and that want to. Obviously, not putting all football players in that box, but I know from experience, myself included, like alcohol abuse and drug abuse in general, especially in the NFL with opioids and, other prescription medications as well. So I think even to have a product like this where it spans for athletes as well as, someone who's older and maybe dealing with some type of pain or ailments and like substituting some, maybe some prescription medication that may have not really been serving them as much as they would hope for. I always preach, going the natural route prior to going down that prescription route. And so I just see a lot of different ways that it can help people. And yeah, I'm excited to keep talking about it. So
Yeah, and that's there you go. There's another use case for it. The kratom hits on the same receptors that opioids do. So it hits on, as it turns out, opioid receptors, and it has a pain relieving aspect to it. And so people do use it for that. You and I are not doctors, so we wouldn't say, stop taking the
of
pharmaceuticals
course.
and use this, but try it out and see, see how you respond to it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I want to I've heard you've talked about this a little bit before, but I want to talk about what our relationship with death is like and how can we use that as a positive as opposed to something that, we're kind of scared to talk about or even think about.
Yeah, I used to have a pretty typical view of death, like wanted to avoid it at all costs, and it was the boogeyman underneath my bed type of thing.
Yeah.
Right, that I wouldn't even like, I'd start to think about it and it would like get it out of my mind because I couldn't hold it, I couldn't handle it. That all changed for me when I had my first psychedelic journey, and I got a sense that there's much more to this world than just this existence, this kind of human existence that you and I are sharing. That loosened my grip on death, and it's not like I'm seeking it out, but I just have a piece about me that it's a natural thing, it's gonna happen, there's nothing I can do ultimately to avoid it. And so what does that look like? It's interesting. Someone I would say close to me, an older person, is in the process of passing on right now. It's going to happen soon. And so how do you show up for that person, for the family members around them in this moment? And it's stuff that, I'd say I'd learned from just a lot of the teachings of Ram Dass. And he spent a lot of time in that space of helping people pass on. And, he talks about our culture doesn't want to talk about death. It's in the back room. We avoid it. Someone is clearly about to pass on, and we do them a disservice by avoiding it, saying that they're going to make it, versus being with them in those moments. And it's not like you just give up hope. You let the doctors do their thing and whatever your care is, but be with them in these moments. Allow them the peace to pass on, that it's okay. And having those honest conversations, I think, is really important. Like I said, right now, someone kind of in my sphere is going through that, and it's interesting. It's the first time it's really come up for me since I've had a different view on it. And I think the better relationship we can have with death, in understanding that death is not failure. I think that's how our society views it. It's just not. And if you believe in us having souls, and whether you believe in reincarnation or not, like, there's the person, their essence is always going to be with you. So can you just like allow for their physical manifestation to pass on, but to hold those other pieces?
Yeah.
And it's hard, but I think it's much healthier, and it's showing up for that person who is passing on in a much different way.
Yeah, that's well put. That's well put. I know we're coming to an end here, but there's a question that I always love to ask, and that's, what is your definition of success?
It's kind of, I would say, owning my calendar, in the sense that I'm doing what I want to do at all times of the day. Doesn't mean that I don't have to do shit that sucks.
Right.
It just means that I'm orchestrating that. And I would say I got a bit away from that recently, and that's coming back into balance. It certainly used to be about how much money and success, and I played that game, and I got to, the top of my mountain, and realized that's not it at all. But I think everyone kind of needs to have their own experience with it to see if that's it for them. But for me, it's, can I just really be in control? And I don't even like to use the word control, but can I have agency over what I'm meant to do on a daily basis? And then honestly, like, a layer deeper to that is, can I just open this heart of mine?
Right.
Can I peel back the armor? Can I let those closest to me in? And I haven't ticked that box quite like I'd want to yet. So that's kind of my work to do.
We all have that. We all have work to do.
Yes, sir.
Well, Cal, thank you so much for joining the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for anyone that's listening to this point, you obviously enjoyed today. So go check out Cal. Cal, where can we find you on your socials? Where can we find the podcast?
Social, cal.callahan on Instagram. thegreatunlearn.com is my website, but you can find the Great Unlearn on, Apple, Spotify, wherever else. Yeah. Thanks,
Amazing.
brother. It's been awesome.
It's been awesome. All right,
Tell
guys.
Tell JW I said hello.
Yeah, do the same with Evan. Absolutely. Well,
Right,
thank you
brother.
guys for tuning in to another episode of the Breathe and Air podcast. You know the price of admission. It is sharing this with someone who you think could benefit from it, and then putting it into action. Take one thing, put it into action today. So thank you guys for tuning in, and hope you guys have a great rest of the week. We'll talk to you soon.